Hi, I'm George Nordhaus, and welcome to Monday Morning. This is going to be the first of what I think and hope it'll be more of these back to the business of, it's the basics in a lot of ways. Prospecting by objective is the name of the presentation. Deborah Miller-Pfahler, you're going to hear from her in just a second. But we're going to be talking, or she's going to be talking about getting the best results from time. We're going to be talking time. She's really a time authority. How's that, Deborah? I consider you that way because I've been working with you for so many years. Let me show you Deborah's picture here. Deborah is been in the business for a long, long time. 43 years, how you like that? And she still looks that good. You're going to get mad at me, Deborah, but anyway, because we've known each other for so many years. She worked for Cosmo Conti, who was the #1 State Farm agent. She already had experience with State Farm before that, and she worked for him. And she was, when I say worked for him, she was #2, and boy, she was something. And I've known them for many, many years. And then she moved on down to Columbus, and she became a consultant and an entrepreneur, and she started something called Sales Pro. We won't go in there right now, but she's got a world of experience, and she's got a lot of e-learning creation, and that's a good thing too. And now she's got a new job being Senior Vice President of Operations for INA Links LLC, and you'll hear more about that. Deborah, you've seen a lot of things in your career.
I sure have.
What conclusions have you made? So we can get into what conclusions you made so we can get into prospecting by objective, because that's an unusual title.
Well, prospecting by objective, in my view, is attempting to take a group of knowledge that you are going to acquire about who is the best prospect for you based on the demographics of your agency, what you want to accomplish with the profitability in the agency, as well as the area in which you live, and focus that so you are pinpointing very, very specific to the objective of closing the very best type of sale.
Well, that seems natural. Go on if there's more, because I'm taking notes.
Okay. What I have found, you had mentioned earlier that I had worked in Cosmo's office. I think probably a lot of where I am today was founded back in those days. And, of course, way back in the day, you'll remember that we had paper files and paper file cabinets. And when we worked in the Cleveland office, we had thousands of clients, and therefore we had, oh my goodness, 25 foot of file cabinets. And it was just absolutely crazy, and you had so many people who had time devoted to nothing but paper. When I set up the office in California, we had a very limited amount of space, and as a result, I had to think about how we could accommodate a number of staff members in a professional space without all of that file cabinet mess, if you will. And so I worked in the automation system that we had, and I attempted to create a paperless environment. Now, the reason I'm even bringing that up is because that first portion of automation was new to everyone. It's not new to them anymore. However, what was new to the staff members that we worked with in San Diego was attempting to document and to pull together as much resource as they could about that client, about a prospect, and therefore have everything in front of them so they would be able to extract that very important information to build relationship. Now, when I came into the independent agency system, I literally had a culture shock. Coming from a captive, and I kind of liken it to a captive being a parent who supplies their kids with everything they need. The independent agency system, on the other hand, are almost like orphans. They have all of these different companies coming at them with different types of objectives and needs and processes and procedures, and to try and wade out through that to be the very best that they possibly can is really quite challenging. But the full key of what I've learned over the last many years, and I have now devoted since 98, I guess it was, my career in the independent insurance agency system, is that truly the differences are not that great because the way in which you prospect, if you prospect correctly, is not that different. It really should be very succinct and very, very focused, and that's what I've been doing over the last many years.
That's fascinating. Well, let's talk about prospecting. Let's get into it. Give me the basics. Give me the basics.
Well, I think the first thing that we need to do is to establish what truly is prospecting. I think a lot of people think that to be successful in prospecting today, you have to go out and find enough people that can or will buy your product at the right price.
Sure,
and this gets back to this whole issue of price shopping.
That's common sense. That's got to be true. I mean, what's wrong with that?
Well, let me ask you, would you say that that is a true statement
Sure.
based on what you know, or it's not?
Absolutely. Why not? Absolutely.
Well, it truly is a false statement because we want to try and divert their attention away from price. We want also not to spend all of our time and our resources spinning our wheels on the type of prospect that either is going to end up being unprofitable to the agency or it's not going to stay with the agency. And I think that really is the key. And so what I'd like to do is just take a moment and go through what I believe prospecting really is.
All right.
I believe that to be successful in prospecting, it is very important that you have the ability to develop a relationship with the right people or the right business groups if you're working in commercial that have the right size income potential and they have a problem or you can solve a need for them. Now, how is that different? That's different because what we are talking about here is being proactive rather than reactive. And I think that that is probably the paradigm shift that I'm hoping anyway we're going to see happen. Agencies historically have just picked up the telephone, somebody wants a quote, they will give the quote, and they don't really take a look at how much that costs the agency, how much time, and really what is the net result as a result of that. So that's what I am hoping anyway that I can convey when we talk about prospecting by objective.
All right. It's fascinating to me. These are the basics. These are the basics we all learn, but it's been changing so much. Go ahead. I don't want to interrupt you. You're doing fine.
Well, if I can just kind of get into it to perhaps help people understand why this is important, it's because there is such a thought, and I think this continues to be the thought, that prospecting is nothing more than a numbers game. You go out and you find a list and you begin hammering at that list, getting X dates if you can, if not, however it is that you're beginning to try and communicate with those people. I believe that prospecting is much more than just large numbers of cold contacts. I think prospecting truly is the method that you use to generate those prospects, so the producers have the capability and the best shot at turning that cold prospect, if you will, into a customer, ultimately a client, and into an advocate. Mm-hmm. That means, I think, on the front end is to do a little bit of the qualifying. Now, qualifying can be thought of as, well, the producer is going to call and ask a number of questions. That perhaps is qualifying in one degree, but the way I want to have qualifying used here is we are not just going to just broad brush our list. We're going to try and hone in on the specifics of what is best for the producer, the best close ratio, and frankly, I think that that qualifying begins even before you run a list.
I think that I agree with you because you just, well, I don't want to interrupt you, but go ahead. How are we going to go after? I mean.
Okay. Well, the first thing I think is necessary is that the agency have the ability to define their ideal client. Now, I am a proponent of grading your existing clients. And what that means is that you're identifying within your existing book of business those individuals that are truly making you money, the ones that are willing to give you the referrals, the ones who are willing to allow you opportunity to talk to their neighbors and their families. You're insulating the entire account. They're easy to work with, they're profitable, so forth. So if you can identify who those people are in your agency, then you can actually begin to formulate your plan to focus on the type of individual that is not typically going to shop.
You know, we've been saying that all along for many, many years. You got to identify who you make money on and who you don't. But I see so few agencies that really do that. That really.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
No, what do you? I know you've got a bunch of stuff on that. Let's attack that one on how to do it. Okay. Not this boom, but next time we do this or something, let's talk about how can they really tell who's making money out.
Well, the first thing, as I mentioned, is that it's very important that you identify who you perceive to be the best client for your agency. And again, you can assess the ideas of what type of criteria that you would put on it, but I would strongly suggest that the leading criteria not be what they pay, because frequently an individual that pays a great deal to your agency is an extremely difficult person to deal with. And I could wager to say that if any manager would ask their CSAs to name the top 3 people that are the most difficult for them to deal with, the manager or the principal would see that those 3 people probably do generate a great deal of money. But in fact, when you take a look at how much time and energy and morale, the lack of morale, I should say, for staff members, they're really not that profitable for you. So once you can identify those people, it's important that you look for common characteristics. Are they within a demographic of the same type of business? Profiling as far as their age, or do they have children? Do they attend certain events? All of these things can go hand in hand in trying to identify who those folks are. And then another way too is most likely these may also be who your competitors are going after. So who are the current customers perhaps of your competitors? That might at least be a good springboard for you to really hone in on that type of individual. Now, why is this important? This is important because even as you are focusing on your existing clientele for the purposes of grading your existing customers, it's historically a fact that 80% of a producer's revenue is going to be generated by only 20% of their customer base. But unfortunately, what happens is that the majority of their time is devoted to perhaps the bottom 10%, which is just literally taking away every possibility they have to proactively pursue the type of clientele that they would like to go after. So really, to focus on this, it's very important that they increase the success ratio of that top 20%. Now, increasing the success ratio, that is a matter of developing a stronger relationship with them, calling them unexpectedly and finding out what you can do, the little things, and sending them thank yous, letting them know that you truly appreciate them, but not just from a standpoint of it being a fluff. In other words, you really are going to attempt to provide them with that value-added service that we've heard of so many years now. And then at the bottom line too, and this has been very difficult as I've worked with producers, getting rid of that bottom 10%. When I have spoken to agencies about looking at grading, then getting rid of that bottom 10%, they shudder. But if they take a look, if they can step back from the emotions of it and take a look really at what that 10% is doing to the morale of the agency, to the time commitment that's invested in all of the problems that they seem to have, I think they would recognize that it really would be to their benefit to simply let them go.
You know, I've seen very few agents. Everybody talks a good game about this, but very few. You know, dear Mr. Jones, we can't do your account because blah blah blah, and they just don't do it. As you and I over the months and years ahead do more of these, let's talk about how to do that exactly. Won't you?
Okay.
I need you to tell me.
The very first thing that we need to do is to assure the producer that they will in fact recover if they are able to let go of that lower 10%. And if we are going to be focusing this around strengths, the strength really has to be focused on building the relationship. And that is truly what is going to position the producer as a trusted advisor. And that's really what they want, because individuals want to do business with people that they trust and that they feel is truly going to be looking out after their best interest. And it is a differentiating factor as to why an individual would choose to do business with you. I think the optimal word there is choose, because people choose whether or not it's going to be on price or it's simply on the relationship. And if there's no relationship involved, then there's no reason for them to consider anything other than price.
And you talk to agents, they say, oh, we have a relationship. Well, how many people do you have a relationship with? Well, we have 50. We know we're really, how many customers? You got 3,000. You know, it's just not happening. At any rate.
Well, and their view of a relationship may be that they send them a Christmas card.
Yeah.
You know, a true relationship, I think, in many ways, especially for that upper tier, is far greater than just, you know, one or two contacts, or perhaps what people would consider to be quick and valuable service.
Right.
So, why is this important? Because you're never going to have the lowest price. There's never going to be a continual period in which any agency in the United States is going to have the lowest price. And then factor that in with all of the reasons why people leave. And I think this is really quite interesting. Of course, we know that people move away, and that, you know, there's nothing that we can really do about that. But 5% of the clientele moves away simply because they, in fact, have begun to develop relationships with somebody else. Another 9% leave because of competitive reasons. And this gets back to this whole focus away from price. Only 9% of all of the individuals that any agency may lose in any given year are truly leaving for price. There is always another reason, but price will be blamed for those other reasons.
Good. I like that.
For example, if they are dissatisfied with your product, in this case about 14% of those people will leave because they're not happy with the product. Well, perhaps they're not happy with the product because you have not taken the time to do any type of a review. You have not spoken to them about the life changes that have occurred in their household, or perhaps ways in which you can perfect the existing policy coverages that's going to be better suited to their existing needs rather than what it was 15 years ago. The other true reason is 68% leave because of an attitude of indifference. And what does that mean? Well, once again, if you have your insurance with somebody that you never hear from, and you're hearing from the competitors, whether it be over the telephone, it be over the radio, the TV, or the billboards, whatever it may be, then why is there not a reason to leave? That indifference, they just feel like, hey, I'm spending my money, I don't have any claims, so why not? I'm going to go after the lowest price. The one thing that I think is really quite interesting, though, is that the typical business will only hear from 4% of their dissatisfied clients. Rarely does a business have a means in place to communicate with a client who's just left them, to find out, what did we do? How can we solve the issue that prompted you to want to leave? Unfortunately, because that is not in place, that dissatisfied customer now is going to turn around and tell 8 to 10 people that they are unhappy with that particular agency, or that particular service. And to make matters even worse, statistics will tell you that 1 in 5 are going to tell 20 people. So, I mean, talk about bad press.
Well, we're talking about retention. How are we going to keep them? That's a good thing that we need.
Well,
I know you and I are going to talk more about this in the future too, but go ahead.
Yep. All about retention. Everything about retention focuses on the relationship, but it also supports the agency in reducing their overhead. Statistics way back when, and I'm confident that you've heard these numbers before, will typically tell you that it takes 2.5 years to recover the acquisition costs of an individual policy. Commercial, they say anywhere will cost you about $1,200 to $1,500 to produce a new piece of business on commercial. How long do you have to keep that business in order to just recover from the acquisition costs? Now, to retain a piece of business only costs 40 cents on the dollar. So if you have the proper procedures in place that are really focused around building the relationship, building the loyalty, helping the clients recognize that you're providing far more value than the competitor on the TV that's talking about the lowest price. That's really where the key is.
Boy, that's so important. That is, I never really thought about that. I didn't realize. Oh, go ahead. I didn't realize a lot of things. I'm learning a lot doing Monday morning, I can tell you. There's your State Farm deal.
You remember the State Farm 10-year retention studies from years back, and I know that you've even referred to this in years past. I can tell you definitely that this is true. When I worked with Cosmo, it's hard for me to give you exact numbers now, but I would guess that 65 to 70% of our entire agency book had 2 lines, probably 3 lines, and of course because he was successful in winning various awards for all 5 lines, a good many of them had 5 lines. But the point I'm making is that as a result of every policy that you bring on, in addition to that basic policy, you're holding on to that client. And you are now saving all of that money because you're retaining the business, you're renewing it, and this is where you're making your profit.
You know, I always heard, though, that with State Farm, that third policy, that 92% was if the third policy was life insurance oriented. I don't know if that was true or not, but that's one I always used. Good, better, and different.
Well, you know, that was his expertise, and he was highly decorated as far as his life insurance capabilities. But yes, I think when somebody is trusting you enough to say yes to something that's going to protect your family, then everything else really doesn't matter at that point. So I believe you're correct.
All right.
Okay, so now hopefully we have built a case to change, and all of this change has to go through the paradigm of what is currently the way in which we do business and what is the way that we should do business. But let me just give you some bottom line numbers here that will perhaps even take somebody's thinking and move it further down the line. If an agency can reduce their expenses by only 3%, and they have got a $2 million book, that's going to save the agency $9,200. And that doesn't sound like a whole lot, but if you couple that small savings in expense reduction with boosting the retention, this is really where these numbers make a huge difference. Boosting an agency client retention rate by only 2%, and I believe the average personal lines agency out there, and forgive me if I'm wrong, last I heard was about 88%. So if they're able to boost that to 90%, it's like cutting 10% off of their expenses.
Okay.
So again, not only are they going to have happier staff members, but they're going to, hopefully anyway, see a far greater revenue that's going to come in their pocket. Okay, now we've been talking about retention, and of course retention really focuses around building the entire account. And I think that the thing that is very important is that we must always have top of mind that every account that we write has a number of additional policies that can be written. I can recall back when Marshberry gave some statistics based on personal line selling, and I thought it was really quite interesting because he mentioned at that time, of course, a $700 annual premium on a personal lines account is probably now $1,500. But just for the sake of example, he was mentioning that if you have a single policy and you gain $700 from that, you're gaining approximately $84 in commission, and that's based on a 12% commission rate. But the expense to write that is 71 cents on the dollar. Now, if you double that, so in other words, instead of a $700 account, you're writing a $1,300 account, you gain $156 in commissions, but your expense to write that reduces from 71 cents per dollar down to 38 cents per dollar.
Wow, that's important.
So all of that goes hand in hand in the bottom line. But of course, we all know too that those clients that have multiple lines with you frequently, in addition to staying with you, are not those individuals that have payment problems. They're usually not the individual that is going to have a claim problem. Well, sometimes they do. I mean, accidents happen and young people have accidents. But the bottom line is that the change in the demographics of your agency is going to yield a much greater value to the agency. And that's really what we're talking about here and attempting to pursue the entire account.
And then there are referrals.
Oh my goodness, yes, referrals. And I think I even gained this information from you years back, that a referred lead has a 67% close. Now, why is that? Because we are transferring, when we refer somebody, we are transferring the trust that they do not have. They are receiving the trust from us. So in other words, we're saying this is a good person for you. I care about you, and so therefore this is an individual that you should really consider. A referred lead is absolutely the best thing that can be. Now, a lot of people have problems asking for referrals. They don't necessarily like to be in your face, and we all know that asking for a referral right after you have placed the business, or perhaps you have handled a claim, or there has been a special occasion that has been acknowledged, is the best time. But for those individuals that are a little bit reluctant, there's another way, and this is more of a passive way, and that simply is asking your client, and preferably those that you're in contact with, your A and your B clients, what type of professional organizations do they belong to? Are they involved in community activities? Are they in an office building that has other tenants? Can they just simply give you names? And getting a name is in essence the same as a referral. When you do call that individual, you're going to say, I was speaking to George Nordhaus and he recommended that I call you. And so it's not necessarily telling them something incorrect if you speak to them ahead of time and just say, I would like to be able to use you as a referral. Maybe you can just give me names of people in your office. I actually had a client in California. Her entire book was referral only, and it was phenomenal. She had people who were calling her on a continual basis simply because she made the announcement far and wide that her business was exclusively by referral. And quite frankly, many of her clients thought of her as somebody that was really more prestigious to work with, because she wasn't going to work with just anybody. She was only going to be working with those individuals that came to her by referral.
I'll tell you what, Deborah, let's get her on, let's do a Monday morning with her. Let's talk later on about that. That'd be interesting.
Okay.
Okay, as we hear the end, get to the end again, we're back to relationships again now.
Yep,
Here
back
we go.
to relationships. Okay, what we've been talking about here is moving a customer into a client and moving that client into an advocate. And again, if you can actually identify the type of prospect that you have in your agency right now, that top 20, and you can really begin to cultivate those relationships, that's what it is that I'm trying to convey in prospecting by objective. We know a suspect is simply somebody that you have a name. A prospect may be somebody that you have a little bit more of information on. The customer is where they have purchased one policy from you. And again, they are still price conscious. If they are, if they've come to you especially by quoting over the telephone, and that's a whole nother subject that I could get involved in, is to shift the paradigm and not quote over the telephone. But what, again, we want to focus on is this client to become an advocate. And the advocate is the one who is going to truly make your agency money.
Well, no question about that, and I'm glad this puts it right in line. I like that slide a lot. Well, let's what happens then? What happens at the end, huh?
Well, at the end, and I alluded to it briefly just a moment ago, there are many things that can be done that can help you to focus away from reactive writing of business, stopping the quoting over the telephone. And I know that this for some people would, again, that's another big paradigm shift. When I was in Cosmo's office and we were limited on space and we decided that we were going to shift the way in which we brought on new clients, our thrust in that whole environment was relationship building. We were new to the community. We needed to get our name out there. And so our staff members stopped quoting. It was a requirement. They were not going to quote over the telephone. They were going to invite customers into the office. Now, the number of individuals that came into the office were considerably lower than those they could have given a quote. But what was really quite interesting is that when you took a look at the costs involved and the ratios involved, doing it that way and then even moving into different ways of marketing truly was able to move an average agency into a good agency into a better agency, and therefore into the best agency.
That's a beautiful thing, and this is really, this presentation is basic, and I know that a lot of people say, well, I've heard all this. This is what I suggest people do with this, Deborah. Take this Monday morning and let your newer people listen to it. Let them really understand when you listen to a pro like Deborah, who's been there and done that and worked for the best, state with the best as a State Farm agent in history, really. It can't get any better than that. So, Deborah, let me see how people can call you or contact you.
Yes, yes, that would be fine.
I'm glad
I might also tell you that as I was working with another environment, I actually created an Excel spreadsheet, if you will, that was very interactive, and it really would show somebody at a glance what the differences would be to their bottom line if they shifted the way in which they brought in new business.
Will you send that to them?
I'd be happy to.
Oh my gosh, that's great, and that's terrific. Well, Deborah, thank you very much. I'm just really excited about your new position and all the new things you're doing, and the fact that you and I are going to be doing a number of these presentations on this will be a great thing, and I love that. So I will suggest to people as they leave today that the next 2 weeks are going to be somewhat different than Monday morning. I'm going to be the presenter. I have a program that I've been doing for many years called Tomorrow's Agency Today, and I always bring it up to date. Well, the next 2 weeks are going to feature Tomorrow's Agency Today. And be ready for it. One's longer, the first one's longer, but the second one's shorter, but the length isn't important. What is important is it has all the information that I've gleaned over these years kind of put into a presentation showing the effect of all the new communications and the marketing and the technology that's going on and what agencies are going to have to do. And I want to tell you, Deborah, we build right on just exactly what you said here. But at any rate, that's what you're going to see the next 2 weeks. Don't forget that you can go back to the email today and sign up, or you can take the quiz flash, which is always fun to do, or you can go to the errors and omissions tip of the week. And Deborah, again, I thank you. And for the rest of you, I will see you next Monday morning.
Thank you, George.